Good morning. Today is Friday, March 17th, 2023. There's one object in the Mishkan, the sanctuary that was built by the Jewish people and traveled with them through the desert, that we are discussing in this week's Torah portion, Vayakel Pekudei. There's one object that does not get the attention it deserves. On the surface, it is a purely utilitarian object and not nearly as flashy as many of the other objects. But its role is absolutely essential, and the lessons that it teaches us are deep and necessary. And I'm referring this morning to the Paroches. The Paroches is the tapestry made of many different colors, many different types of threads, which hung inside the Mishkan building, the structure, in front of the Kodesh HaKedoshim. So if you would walk inside, there was an open area. In front of you was the golden altar. To the left, a bit further back, would be the menorah. And on the right would be the shulchan, the table. But then you would see this curtain, the Paroches. And behind the Paroches was the Aron, the ark, which contained the luchos, the two tablets on which are engraved the Aseret Dibros, the 10 Commandments, which we discussed last night and several times over the last few weeks. Kind of like, the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. So this is behind the curtain. That's the Kodesh HaKedoshim, the Holy of Holies. Now, we use this word Paroches today to refer to the curtain in a synagogue in front of the Aron Kodesh, the Holy Ark, behind which are our Torah scrolls. So there is a parallel between our Paroches and the Paroches in the Mishkan and later in the Beis HaMikdash, the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. But in the Mishkan, the Paroches was much more than just a curtain in front of an opening. The Paroches defined the Kodesh HaKedoshim, the Holy of Holies, which was behind this curtain, and distinguished it from the lesser holiness of the outer part of this building, this room. Because our sages explained that putting the Paroches in place, hanging that Paroches, is what created the extra holiness behind it of the Holy of Holies, the Kodesh HaKedoshim, by placing a boundary between what was just holy and what was the Holy of Holies, the Kodesh HaKedoshim. And this is a crucial spiritual lesson. Sanctity, holiness, requires boundaries. Only when there are things we cannot do and places we cannot go do we create holiness where we are. We see this in the comprehensive mitzvah in the Torah that we will encounter in just a few weeks, where the Torah says to the entire Jewish people, to every one of us, Kedoshim tiyu, be holy. Well, okay, be holy. But how do you do that? How do we achieve that? How do we become holy? Well, there are several different opinions, but Rashi famously says, the way to become holy is to withhold yourself from certain actions, to create boundaries. Rashi says, Shekol makom she'ata motza geder, because only in any place where you will find a geder, a boundary, a delimiting boundary, atamosa kedusha, that is where you will find holiness and sanctity. Conversely, living without boundaries or limits, doing whatever, going wherever we want, leads us to pure hedonism, and materialism. And to borrow from the poet Robert Frost, living such a life is like playing tennis without a net. You may have fun, but you will never become a good player. Similarly, we use the term Kiddushin, that same word, sanctification, holiness, to mean marriage, because by a couple agreeing to prohibit themselves from any other intimate relationship, to limit themselves, to create a boundary between themselves and any other intimate relationship, they create intimacy uniquely between the two of them. This drawing of a boundary creates kiddushin, holiness, sanctification, which is the purpose of marriage between them. And this is, in fact, the essence of a spiritual approach to life. And the truth is, this is very hard for many of us, especially today. You know, when Shabbos begins, tonight, Friday night, we will recite Kiddush, which is the prayer of sanctification to mark the beginning of this holy day. Tomorrow night, when Shabbos ends, we make Havdalah, which means to separate or to distinguish between the holy Sabbath and the mundane work week. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel famously wrote, "The problem for the modern Jew is they are able to recite Kiddush, but unable to make Havdalah." In other words, he was conveying that we tried to achieve sanctity, but we're not willing to create the boundaries and the limits. And the consequence of that is that the Kiddush itself, without Havdalah, without limits and boundaries, the Kiddush, the attempt at sanctification and holiness, loses much of its energy. So that's a profound understanding of an approach to life that we gain from this object, the Paroches. Allow me to share 1 second last insight. The Rav, Rabbi Yosef Soloveitchik, used an unforgettable metaphor to help us make sense of our incoherent, chaotic, confusing lives that we so often confront. And here's the metaphor he used. Imagine you were looking at the back of a magnificent, unlined tapestry hanging in a museum, but you're looking at the back of it. You see a profusion of threads strung wildly in every direction, a riot of colors with no apparent purposeful arrangement, no fine embroidery, only an appalling mess. But then you realize that you're only looking at the backside of a brilliant work of art. And after staring at it for a while, the picture may begin to fall into place. You may be able to detect a motif, a hint of a grand design, a trace of a pattern. Now you sense hints of the tapestry's coherence and harmony. You know that if you could see its front side, you would find it breathtakingly beautiful. That's the metaphor. And by that, he means, as Rabbi Maurice Lamb explains, from the earth, from our lives today, we contemplate God's universe from its reverse side. And when we truly believe that God is the divine designer, we will discover, we hope, we try to discover a coherent meaning from the clues we find. A grand design in the seemingly wild threads and colors of this world, though we will never get to see it from God's perspective, because we're limited by our human perspective. We intuit it is magnificent. We may be confused about the patterns of life, and on the surface it often makes no sense, but we feel certain that behind it all, beyond the reach of our senses, there is justice and fairness. If we believe that creation is divine and the world is created with purpose, then even if the threads of life are bewildering, you can be confident that the universe has a system and a plan and a pattern. Now, with this magnificent metaphor, we can appreciate the deeper significance of the Paroches in the Mishkan, because Rashi tells us an astounding fact about this tapestry. Rashi tells us that this tapestry, as you looked at it from the front, had a beautiful image that amazed and delighted everyone who saw it. But unlike any other tapestry, the back of which is chaotic and meaningless, a mess, this tapestry was woven so that there was a beautiful image visible on both sides. Now, this is an astounding feat of craftsmanship. Ask any quilter or tapestry artist if they could even imagine such an accomplishment, to weave something that has a visible, beautiful pattern on both sides. But building on Rabbi Soloveitchik's metaphor, we see that in the Mishkan, in God's presence, everything is clear on both sides. The world and our lives make sense as we see God's hand at every moment. That's what it means to have a Mishkan, to have a Beis HaMikdash. Unlike now, where God is hidden, and we only see the chaotic back of the tapestry, trying, but often failing, to see any of the spectacular beauty and order on the front side. This Shabbos, we read the double portion Vayakel Pekudei, with which we conclude the book of Shemos, the second book of the Torah, and with which we conclude our annual review of the Mishkan, and later the Beis HaMikdash, the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, with all of its details. And this review has taken us over the course of 5 Torah portions. For the last few weeks, you and we have shared many lessons about the meaning this enterprise has in our lives today. And I hope that we will take from all of these lessons an appreciation of what we can gain today from understanding the Mishkan in all its details. But the final lesson, the lesson with which I leave us this year, must be that this structure, this Ohel Moed, tent of meeting, the place we encountered God, the place where God is manifest and the world is clear and ordered and makes sense on both sides, the place where there is unity and purpose and meaning, we do not have it. We pray for its return. Ubiyushalayim ircha barachamim tashuv. We pray to God, please return your presence to Jerusalem in all of its openness and clarity, the way we had it when the Beis Hamikdash was standing. V'sechazena einenu b'shuvcha l'Tzion. May we merit seeing the return of God's manifest presence to Zion and to the Jewish people and to the world. Until then, we only see the messy backside. We try to have faith in the beauty of the front, but it is a challenging task. We learn about the Mishkan in great detail, and the Paroches in particular, to remind ourselves of what we are missing and what we hope to soon regain. Yehi ratzon, may it be God's will, sheyibana Beis Hamikdash, that the Holy Temple in Jerusalem will be rebuilt, bimheira b'yameinu, speedily in our days, so that we will again have the clarity and the closeness and the understanding of the beautiful pattern that is then visible on both sides of the tapestry. My friends, I want to wish you a great day and a beautiful Shabbos, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person.